All right. So I figured I'd do a live today. I thought it was going to be a lot easier than trying to edit something and put it all together. So, anyways, Memorial Day weekend. Definitely a powerful weekend here in the United States where everybody celebrates all the fallen soldiers, which is a good thing. So, one of the things we got going on tomorrow is a new moon, and that's going to happen right on Memorial Day. And this is really kind of a good new moon. I like it. It's actually happening in the sign of exaltation in Taurus. And what I like about that is it's happening in a lunar mansion called Rohini. And you might say, well, what does that mean? Well, there's lunar mansions that surround the Earth. And it's really pretty interesting stuff. I'll put this on the screen. You could see here, this is a diagram. So if you put the Earth in the middle, and you had the Earth circling around. This is kind of a complex diagram, but it's the lunar mansions and also what they call the nakshatra. So it's a little hard to, see stuff like that on the screen. But what it means is, see, this is actually starting in a very powerful placement. It's in the what we call kalachakra dosha position of Scorpio. So again, this is a very powerful transitional new moon. So depending on where it happens in your chart, again, new moons happen every single month, obviously, right? But they happen in our birth chart in certain houses, and they make certain aspects to us. And unless, you have access to an astrology program, which a lot of people do these days, they jump online, they go to Astrology, or, if you have an ability to get a program, it's kind of interesting to note where these things happen in your life. So it's a powerful energy on every new moon. The ancient cultures always paid a lot of attention to it. And this one actually starts in a reverse Kala chakra. And again, what is Kala? Kala is time. Chakra is the wheel. And it's something that's really caught my attention. Again, this is the general concept here of the figure 8. This is the serpent of time. That's constantly going on. So it's really cool stuff. And I got to tell you, I've been really enamored with studying this system. I think it was about 35 years ago. I had a teacher, even close to 40 now. A teacher told me, he said, you got to study the kalachakra dosha. And it was so complex to calculate. I remember we had all these charts and graphs. And, after about 30 minutes, we got it figured out. And he says, oops, I made a mistake. And then it took another hour to straighten that out. And I went, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this. It's too complex. So what was cool is just recently I got the computing power to do this. And I've been adding this in readings when I do with clients. And I also find that this was used by the ancient in many ways. When events would happen, you can use it in interrogations, you can even use it in elections and new moons and ingresses like the solstice and equinox points. And by the way, we got the summer solstice coming up here right in the third week of June. And of course, that's when the days and the evenings are even. So that's why, what am I saying? No, that's when the days are longest and the nights are shortest. It's the equinox where they're even. I got that wrong. But really a powerful time because summer begins at the summer solstice, right? And of course, it's the opposite in the winter where the days are the shortest and the nights are the longest at the winter solstice. So it's very powerful to pay attention to these things. They have a lot of power. One of the big things that I have on the thumbnail today is we have the lunar eclipse points changing. And that's going to go, see, they're known as Rahu and Ketu. Also, some people may know it as the head of the dragon and the tail of the dragon. And here, I'm going to share my screen just to show you this. It's kind of cool. Little diagram. Give me a minute here to get everything lined up. But what's cool about this is now I'm sharing, you can see this little diagram right here is one I use a lot. And it's just demonstrative of the eclipse points. I always say Shakespeare was right. The whole world's a stage. We're the actors. And of course, Rahu is the movie we're playing. And notice Rahu is synonymous with head of the dragon, north node, and also this little horseshoe. And Ketu is the exit out of the theater, so to speak, if you will. And Ketu also rules the tail of the dragon. And there's some really interesting legends on this. They actually say there was an ancient legend where God gave all the angels and the planets their immortal potions. This is one version of it. And this demon snuck in and drank the potion. And the sun told God that, this was the case. And they threw a discus at it and cut it in half. Well, the head became Rahu, or you could say the head of the dragon, which rules worldly issues, and the tail rules otherworldly issues. And this has a lot connected with karmas, positive worldly experiences, and also exiting out. In fact, you can see a lot of past life stuff in charts by looking at juxtapositions to Ketu. So why am I bringing this all up? Well, they go around the Earth about every 18.5 years. And you might say, okay, great. What does that mean? Well, there's big shifts when this stuff happens. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here for a second. And when this stuff happens, you really feel a shift. And I can tell you what's going to happen here is Ketu jumps from Cancer to Leo. And that's from water to fire. And Rahu, the moon's north node, is going to shift back from Pisces to Aquarius. So what this does is it ignites a fire-air trine. Well, if anybody's familiar with motors and combustions and starting fires, right, that you have to have air and fire, and they juxtapose one another. And this is exactly what's about to happen. In fact, here, I'll give you a visual on that in another way. What I'm going to do is share my screen again, and I will show you how that's actually happening. What I'll do is I'll just pop over here to the screen, and you can see here, this is the Vedic astrology program that I use, which is pretty good. And you can see this is the new moon, by the way. That's literally happening on the 26th. You can see the date up here, 26 new moon. See that? And it's going to happen right around 8:03 p.m. Pacific time. And of course, if you're somewhere else, East Coast, just add 3 hours, Midwest, add 2, Mountain, add 1. Or if you're on the other side of the world in Australia or, Europe or wherever you happen to be, just figure out your time zone. So this is Pacific Daylight Time. So that'll be the new moon. And notice it happens in the lunar mansion of Rohini. And it's in what we call the first pada. Pada is a weird name that means division. So that's very powerful. But you're also going to find, and this is what I was talking about a minute ago, you can actually see here, that's the moon's north node eclipse point known as Rahu. It's a little hard to see, but you can see it right there. And that's Ketu. Those are just juxtapositions of where the sun and the moon and the earth align. That's why they call them a node. Well, here's what's about to happen. These will actually transfer this Thursday, the 29th of this month, and very, very powerful. So watch what happens here. I'm going to go forward in daily increments. You guys can keep your eyes on these little horseshoes and notice down here, it says today's date, or I should say tomorrow's date, because that's when the new moon is. But I'm going to go forward in increments of time. I always say God created time, so everything wouldn't happen at once, right? And I really believe that that is true. So if we go forward to next Thursday, you're going to notice something here. Look at, watch these little nodes. A little hard to see, but you'll see, again, Ketu jumps from Virgo backwards to Leo, and you're going to see that Rahu jumps this way to Aquarius. Say, watch, I'll do it again. See, bingo. Now you can see it. See, they jump. That Leo is fire and Aquarius is air. So this is very catalyzing. And what do we have happening in the world? We can see it out there right now. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff brewing. I've heard reports that Russia is amassing massive amounts of troops. They're going to make a major offensive to come in and try and take another city in Ukraine. And I really think from the astrology, we're not going to see World War III. I hope I'm right on that analysis. But I do think we're going to see an activation of stuff that's much more intense. So look what's happening in Gaza. We still don't have a resolution with Iran yet and the nuclear deal. So don't be surprised if we see a lot of stuff brewing here. between now and, of course, July. And you know, I don't get that we're going to have World War III. Many people are predicting the end of the world because it happens all the time. I'm always amazed when I jump on, you know, the internet, particularly YouTube, and I notice how, you know, they're always, you know, it's going to be a financial crash, the end of the world, and Nibiru's going to hit us, all this. And, you know, I'm not demeaning some people are accurate in their predictions, but I don't get that. The reason why we don't have a Saturn-Pluto aspects going on. And just to give you an idea, when we had COVID, Saturn-Pluto conjunction. When we had 9/11, Saturn-Pluto opposition. And also we had other things lining up in what they call Kalasarpa yogas. Now, we do have a Kalasarpa yoga going on right now. And nobody's really mentioning this right now in the astrological community that I see. In fact, I'm going to take a second and jump back on to the screen share one more time. And I want to show you this because this is kind of cool to be able to follow along and see what I'm talking about here. So watch, if I jump back to that same Vedic astrology chart, what you're going to notice here, in fact, watch, even if I go back to the new moon, which is really happening tomorrow on the 26th, notice something. If you just eyeball what I'm talking about here, all the planets are on this side of those eclipse points known as the north and south nodes, which is really where eclipses happen. And notice there's nothing on this side. See? So that's called a Kalasarpa yoga. Well, what does that mean? Kala means time. Sarpa means serpent. That means the serpents, or you could say the eclipse points, which serpentine around the earth, are causing all the planets to be on one side. This is always a dicey time in the world. And it is a dicey time. And we can't minimize what's going on right now. Lots of stuff going on. We've got all the stuff with the deportations going on, the tariffs that are still ironing out. We've got the European Union and Trump kind of going back and forth. We've got a lot of dissension. There's riots all over the place. You know, I mean, it's definitely intense. I just heard there was riots in Northern Europe here. So we're definitely, and we got the Gaza Strip thing going on. We got, again, the Ukraine, China is kind of quieted down for a minute, right? So there's a lot of stuff going on. And this is likely to exacerbate that. The other thing is you're going to notice here, our little friend Mars is going to go from Cancer into fire. And another thing I didn't notice, or I didn't mention, I should say, is when these nodes on the 29th, which is this coming Thursday, jump from the water earth trines to the fire air trines, guess what that means? That's a term that Vedic astrologers use called Gandanta. And you might say, well, what does that mean? Well, that means when a given body in the heavens goes from sidereal water signs into sidereal fire trines, it's very volatile. It's intense. Things just happen. And that's about what's to happen this coming Thursday. So don't be surprised if we see things more brewing. You know, and there's a lot of people out there who are saying, you know, there's a lot of things that need to be resolved that have been going on for a while. And I think this is going to be catalytic. It's definitely going to cause things to get more intense in energy. Now, here's the real intense one. And this is another, quote unquote, transfer from the water trines to the fire trines. Again, it's called Gandanta. It's kind of a weird word in English, but it's a very important word. And watch Mars right here. See, if you can see on the screen, this is degrees in minutes. And that's how planets are measured in what we call longitude. It's all mapped out in the sky, so to speak. So watch what happens on June 6th. Now, this is a ways away. You can see every day that I go forward here, these planets increase in degrees. And bingo, right there, right around June 6th, the Mars, for the first time in 2 years, ingresses into the fire trine. So you might say, okay, great, Jeff, what does that mean? Well, that's intense, and I can't minimize that. Don't be surprised if we see a lot more volatility rearing its head here in June and July. And another thing I noted, too, is that we've got Uranus going to a conjunction in July of the planet Alcyon. And it's not planet, what am I saying? Star, fixed star Alcyon. So the planet Uranus is going to go to the conjunction of Alcyon. What's 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐻? Well, 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐻 is a really interesting planet because it is also believed by many of the ancients to have been the central star. Here, I'll show you that right now. See, if you take the yugas and also, again, I know a lot of people are flat earthers. And again, I don't want to get into that whole quagmire, but you can see here, our solar system is believed to traverse around a central sun. And some of them believe that it was 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐻. Again, that's disputable by some, but there is definitely correlations that 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐻 is a very powerful fixed star. And Uranus in the solar system is going to align between the Earth and, of course, 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐻 and Uranus. So that's a very powerful energy that's coming up. We also have the fixed star 𝐸𝐻 coming in there too. So a lot of stuff. And in July, we also have a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So there's a lot of stuff going on here that really shows a lot of powerful things. The other thing that I had talked about, and I want to go back and show you that, is the Kalasarpa Yoga. Now, again, what the heck does that mean? Well, if I go back to where we are tomorrow, which is the new moon, which is on the 26th tomorrow at 8 p.m., what you're going to notice here is that, this is May 26th. There we go, right there. Now you can see what I'm doing. See, this is the time tool. It allows me to line this stuff up here. So here's what's interesting is, again, all the planets are going to stay, behind the nodes, which is called a Kalasarpa Yoga. These are very powerful and very tenuous times in the world. And watch what happens. I'm going to just go forward in weekly increments. And you can see every 2 weeks, like I had mentioned on previous podcasts, if I go forward, I'm going the right way here. The moon breaks the Kalasarpa Yoga, meaning it goes outside of the nodes. And even when the nodes change to the fire earth trines, and I know there's a little bit heady stuff here, it still stays in Kalasarpa mode all the way up until the latter part of July. And Mars is the guy who breaks that. When? It's going to be right around July 27th or 28th. Mars will finally be the planet that leaves and breaks the Kalasarpa Yoga. See, it's a little hard to see here, but see, Mars and the moon always goes out every 2 weeks, but Mars will break it right around the 27th, 28th. So you might say, okay, great, Jeff, what does this mean? Well, Mars always brings tension and violence. There ain't no way around that one. I wish there was. So this is likely to be an intense summer of a lot of hands on the bat and changing and dynamics. And we could see a lot of crazy stuff. Of course, the world's always crazy, isn't it? But I would say this is a dynamic time of change, in my opinion. And we'll see what happens here. So, so that is kind of the immediate energies that's going on. Also, I might mention here that Donald Trump in sidereal astrology has Leo rising. And on the 6th of June, we're going to have Mars ingress into that fire trine. So this puts a lot of heat on the president, which is going to be interesting to see. So we'll see what all happens here. He actually is really in a powerful time, and a lot of people say, they're worried about him getting assassinated. And I cannot say enough about, he's in great danger, but I keep getting he's going to steer through the iceberg patch. I think they're going to try and attempt to kill him. I think they're always wanting to kill him. I mean, we even got Comey and the rest of them and the whole media and the propaganda media and talk show hosts, they're all promoting it. But I would say that I don't think it's going to happen. When Trump got shot at and the bullet grazed his ear, Mars was exactly at his midheaven. This will be in his ascendant. So it's definitely a dangerous time, but it usually ends up being more empowering. So, and again, he's kind of left the Uranus dancing over his midheaven. Remember, Trump had Uranus cross his midheaven right when they read the verdict on that trial with all the counts that they had against him. And again, same thing happened. Mars and Uranus were very close over his midheaven. And of course, the midheaven rules public things. That's exactly what happened. That was pretty public, I think, when he got shot or shot at. Thank God he didn't get shot. But the bottom line is very powerful time right now in the world. And this kind of dovetails back into what I've been saying on other podcasts, that truly this is a transformational time for America. I know a lot of people out there are saying, oh, there's going to be a financial crash. Oh, there's going to be the housing market's going to go like 2008. I'm not getting that. And I hope I'm right about that. I get this is going to play itself out in successions, respectively to what's going on. And yeah, there's going to be trouble with Russia and Ukraine, but I ultimately think Ukraine is probably going to acquiesce and cut a deal. They're going to have to, where Russia's going to probably take this point that they wanted back anyhow. And I'm not agreeing with anybody saying who's right, who's wrong. I don't care. I'm just saying that's what the astrology shows, that we're probably going to see Russia move in a certain, take these other cities or two, and that's going to be a deal's going to be cut. Because that was something Russia really felt, that Kiev and other places were rightfully Russia's. And I'm not, again, here agreeing or disagreeing with anybody. I don't want to get into politics. But I think the astrology says we're going to see a compromise here. And then you're going to see peacekeeping forces come in. And of course, the deal that was cut with the Ukraine and the U.S. government with Trump here on the mineral deals is probably gonna allow us to lock in. And I personally think there's a whole bunch more going on from what I've heard and seen in interrogations than just this simple war between Russia and Ukraine. I think that rabbit hole goes really deep. And we've heard all kinds of theories about things that were going on in Ukraine that were very questionable, et cetera, et cetera. There's been a lot of money changing hands in many mysterious ways over the last probably decade. And so I think this is a lot more complex situation than we're fully aware of. And that's what the astrology says. And let's hope it plays out, because a lot of people on both sides are getting killed. We've heard stories of, people in Russia literally trying to escape, these young men, crossing the border, and they get caught and they get pulled back. No, you're going to the army, kid. So there's a lot of people dying. And, again, when you look at people and stop looking at which side is right and which side is wrong, these young people are conscripted, put in the, and they got to fight. So, it's a tough thing. And a lot of folks are dying. And again, let's hope they can resolve that. And the same thing going on over in the Middle East. It doesn't matter who's on which side. These are people. And a lot of innocent people get killed in these wars. So it's the way it is, and let's hope it gets resolved. Again, I get the astrology says there's going to be more violence, but it's going to compromise ultimately. I don't see World War III, and let's hope that's correct. The reason why usually major conflicts are supported by outer planet transits that are very malefic. We don't have that right now. Even though we got the kalachakra yoga, we got the energies and all that are definitely intense with Mars and the eclipse points moving into these fire and water, or fire and air trines. I would tend to lean towards this. This is going to be intense, but we're going to get through it. We're really resolving a lot of stuff that has been happening. So there you go. So I'm going to take a look at that. That's kind of my quickie car wash read, if you will, of what's happening right now. And again, the world's complex, and there's a lot of things going on. And again, no matter which side of the fence you're on with anything, you want to not see people get killed. It's pretty intense. They actually say the Ukraine-Russian war has had more deaths than any war since World War II. And that is significant. That's a lot of people dying. And boy, the money that's been poured in on that has been actually formidable. And there's a lot of stuff going on with the European Union too, that we're going to see play itself out here. This is a powerful time. I mentioned back when Trump was inaugurated. Now, whether you like Trump or you hate Trump, doesn't matter. I can tell you when he got inaugurated, that was the most powerful inauguration chart I've ever seen. It was a Sun-Pluto conjunction And the sun always rules the leader, the ruler, president, whatever is being, elected. And that sun-Pluto conjunction shows transformation like we ain't never seen, And again, depending on which side of the fence you're on, I know orange man bad, but orange man is loved by a lot of people too. So we'll see what happens here. I personally think not only are we going to see this world stage situation going on, but we're also looking at weather patterns. I've heard earthquakes, and that's another thing this astrology could bring to fore is, again, we're seeing weather patterns that are very intense. I think a lot of that is the sunspots and the juxtapositions of Jupiter and Uranus, very powerful stuff. And they always seem to correlate with these sunspots. And also you got to take into account, we're going around, we're changing constantly through the universe as we progress around. And even to the flat earthers, this model is still happening. Whether you want to say it's flat, projected, whatever, astrology is just amazing how accurate it is. It's actually creepy how accurate it is. It's quite amazing. So I think we're on an evolutional escalation ultimately, no matter what happens. I think Edgar Cayce was right. I think we're going to start living longer. I think we're going to start seeing consciousness expand. And technology, like I said, from 220 forward, we are in an explosive acceleration of technologies. Look at what's happening with AI. Look at what's happening in transportation, et cetera, et cetera. And people might say, yeah, well, but, Orange Man is bringing out more fuel and gas. Yeah, but we're not ready for that transition yet. And I think we are. If you look at some of the Tartarian stuff and free energy stuff that was around, even Tesla had stuff. It was rumored Tesla had a car that would do 120 miles an hour with an antenna sticking up in the air. And do I think that's true? I think it might be. I really do. And there's certainly economics that come into play here. I mean, when you look at the machine of money and the whole thing with our tax structures and fuel and all that, it's such a backbone to this economy. I just don't think we're ready to make that transition at this point. And the next one really looks like we're going to see some big stuff in 2028. Why? That's when a Saturn-Pluto square kicks in. And these, again, I have to say, Pluto really, they can demean it all they want from being a planet. It really plays in all these different major global shifts in juxtaposition with the fixed stars in the Vedic astrology. So it's really interesting stuff. So anyways, yeah, I'm going to take a look at some of the comments here and see what people got to go here. Everybody's saying hi and everybody hello there. So it's great. Yeah. So getting some real interesting comments here on politics, which I don't know if I want to dive into that one, but yeah, somebody's mentioning a documentary here on Ukraine on fire. And yeah, there's so much stuff going on. They talk about the grifter's paradise here. And yeah, I have to say, this is a really powerful time. And this whole situation with Trump going to the Middle East, again, whether you like Trump or hate Trump, don't care. That was a direct attempt to shore up the petrodollar of the United States. Clearly, if you look back at Daddy Bush, not the shrub, not George Bush Jr., but I'm talking the father, George H. Bush, Herbert Walker, or whatever his name was, that was clearly exposed at how much intermingling there was going on with this Middle Eastern oil, distribution and the petrodollar. And I forget, there was one thing I had seen on a clip where literally they were just showing the fortunes of the Saudi Arabian royal and different things that were all interconnected with this. It was quite interesting. And again, I think we're seeing a shuffling of the deck globally, financially, and crypto and all this stuff's going to come into play on this, I think, real soon. I don't think you're going to see anything like we've seen before here as what's happening by the end of this year. Again, the kalachakra dosha is such an interesting thing. And again, that's that serpent of time. And I actually mentioned on my last podcast how literally the United States kicks into, it's completing a major dosha cycle meaning time period, from 1945, which is World War II forward. And in 2033, we shift into a whole new system. And that's going to continue to go all the way in 2000 until 2121. That's a long, long time. That's just short of 100 years. Again, that's from 2033 to 2121. And there's a lot of stuff we could get into on that, which I'll be doing on future podcasts. But the kalachakra dosha is one of the oldest systems ever known in astrology that I've ever heard of. And you can see this, again, is just a simple diagram, but it's these gray areas are reverse time zones, and the white areas are the direct time zone. So it's like time skids forward, skids backwards. And again, it's very interesting when you look at some of the stuff that's going on this planet. I mean, so many people are talking about ufology and things coming out. In fact, by the way, I want to tell everybody something. Next week, I'm going to do another live, but this is going to be fun because I'm going to be at Contact in the Desert. And if anybody hasn't heard that, this is this huge ufology symposium that goes on. A lot of people are going to be there. George Norrie, Graham Hancock, Chris Bledsoe. I'm actually going to hang out with him a little bit. And Camille, it's going to be a lot of fun. And for anybody who doesn't know who Chris Bledsoe is, he's the guy who literally the government's been studying. And we did a podcast with him a long time ago. A really nice guy, sweet guy. And he actually has these orbs come to him. And he thinks they're angels. And I think he might be right. And very interesting stuff where they communicate to him. They tell him about things. And it's interesting because, Chris and I compared notes, and I think we're going to see exactly what I've been talking about. He's getting the same thing from these angelic beings, that we're in a dicey time. We are in a time of rearrangement. And there's a lot of demonic energy on this planet that's always been there. But this gets into some of the Tartarian stuff and some of the other things that is really deep, that many people are talking about on some great podcasts. And that is that there's a lot of beings, I think, that interplay with this reality, this time-space continuum. And there seems to be parallel realities that interblend at times, kind of like the kalachakra dosha, where we get forward and reverse parallel times. And this is deep stuff when you stop and think about it. So it's really, really cool. So anyways, someone's saying here, a flying car and a robot maid. Yeah, that's what I've been saying. It's going to be literally like the Jetsons. And we're so close. We are so close. See, we had a great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn together. They joined on the winter solstice of 2020. And of course, now that's 5 years ago, almost 5.5 years ago. But that set the clock into a new era. And I personally think a lot of demonic energy was playing into that 2020. And of course, look at the politics, look at all the stuff we've seen go on since 2020. COVID was certainly a major, in my opinion, attempt to throw a wrench into society. And it still has. Look at the devastation it's caused in so many ways. That's a deep subject there. A lot of folks were killed in many ways with that one. I'll just leave that one there. And of course, now we're hearing all kinds of things come out about that, and have been coming out. So the point is that we entered into a much, much more higher vibrational ascension that's heading definitely for the next couple hundred years. A lot of astrologers will disagree with me, but I think we're going to hit the Aquarian quote unquote age that they've been singing about since the 60s, right around 200 something years. Look to the Hebrew calendar. That might be really close, in my opinion, to when we ingress into that 6,000 year cycle output to the Aquarian age. Even though the Hebrew calendar is 6,000 years, each sidereal sign as we go around this central sun, or if you're a flat earther, at least the model shows that it acts like we're going around. So the bottom line is we say in each sign somewhere around 2,100 to 22 or 2,300 years. No one's 100% sure because it's not linear, this elliptical cycle. So I think we're going to keep ascending. I'll take a minute and just show that, because that's kind of cool. Here, let me go back to the entire screen. And this, again, I showed this a few minutes ago, but this particular diagram is really interesting. This gets into the yugas, and the yugas are very well known in Vedic astrology, and they're huge time frames that are quite interesting. And the theory, conceptually, is that our sun and the matrix of the solar system goes around this central sun about every 25,900 years. Now, some people say it's 25,700. My opinion is no one knows exactly. I can certainly say I don't. But, and whether you're a flat earther and a projectionist or you're a round earther, I can say that this model, at least conceptually, works to show. And what's fascinating is the ingress is a fancy word when the solar system moves into a sidereal sign. Well, you can see here, that's Aquarius. Okay. I personally don't think we're there yet, but I think we're really close. We're on what they call the edge. Now, astrologers call that a word called the cusp, C-U-S-P, which just means you're right in the zone of all this transition. And Edgar Cayce said, we're going to start living longer. We're going to start getting more aware, psychic, conscious, etc. Now, isn't that interesting? Ever since 220, we've had forces trying to do exactly the opposite, to dumb us down, to poison us, to throw pandemics at us, to do all this crazy stuff that's been happening. And it's a counterbalance, all this transhumanism, all this crazy stuff to thwart that from happening. You can't stop it, in my opinion. It's divine. It's divine. And here's what's even more interesting when you get into the Tartarian stuff and many other things that people are becoming aware of now because of the internet. I personally believe the demonic spirits actually become under the control of humanity the farther we ingress around that to the galactic center. In fact, the Vedas, some really cool books like these back here, that's the Bhagavata. This is the Puranas, and then you've got the Vedas, all kinds of really cool information in that. It talks about how every 4.3 billion years, God yanks in the rug and recasts creation. This is why there's many people out there in quantum physics. Well, we're in an expanding universe, right? Big Bang Theory. And then the other was, no, it's a contraction one. And no one knows. But one thing that these say is that may be continuously going on with the contraction, the explosion, the expansion. This just keeps going on. That's the serpent of time. And this gets into, again, that diagram I always show, which I love this diagram because it's really demonstrative. A lot of people say, well, it's the Kabbalah. No, it's really not. Kabbalah is a word that simply means ancient knowledge. That's all it means. And one of my favorite diagrams, again, is this one right here, if I can find it here. That's another cool diagram I want to talk about in a minute. But see, the serpent of time keeps going on down in what they call the 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞 worlds. See, time and space is believed to start right here underneath the 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞 worlds. And they say the evil spirits, no matter what you want to call them in whatever culture, every culture has a story about this war in heaven, right? And God got mad, cast down the evil spirits. We hear about the fighting with Archangel Michael, all this stuff in different cultures. It's different stories, but the same thing. And the evil spirits might be forced literally to hold matter together. That's why they say everything under the universes, literally, and I say that plurally, is going to be born. It will concretize into a genetic vessel, if you will, that allows us to grow, and time and space happens when birth happens. And it's really wild. They say when the umbilical cord is cut, that's when time and space and the celestial influences, also known as your birth chart, happen. And it's much, much deeper than that, because they actually say that, it's not just your sun sign, the whole celestial influences and the time at which we're born, the parents we're born to, all are embedded into this. So it's not just the, you could say genetics. It is time and space to the soul root. It's almost like astrology is a portal to the soul root. I want to show you this too. This is really cool. If anyone's ever heard of a physicist, now this guy dates way back. Let me look at the date because I'll forget otherwise. This was a guy named August Ferdinand Mobius. He was a theoretical astronomer back in the 1400s. And this is, many people who are familiar with physics may have heard of this. This is called the Mobius strip. It was named after his last name, Ferdinand Mobius. You can look it up on the internet. And notice we've got, just like day and night, we've got night and day, or you could say, more importantly, this is the strip that folds time in the figure 8 configuration. And see, this is reverse time. This is direct time, reverse, direct. And this is the fabric of time and space that so many physicists, including Einstein, had talked about. And Edgar Cayce had talked about this stuff too. Really interesting. And that's what the kalachakra dosha defines in the ancient Vedic or Jyotish astrology. And I'm quite taken with it, I might add, because it's actually the coolest thing to look at your life in readings on that. Now I'm integrating that all the time in readings, because you can see when there's lion's leaps. What does that mean in plain English? Major changes in your life. You can see when there's fast forward modes. You can see when there's reorientation modes. Also, you can look at the positions of these time lords, if you will, called doshas, and see whether it's good or challenging. And, that brings me to another thing. I've had people say, well, Vedic astrology predicts the future. And I always go, well, hang on a minute. I think it predicts the energy that's coming at you in the future. But you got to add one thing. And this is where I really agree with the religions on astrology. And that is, interrogations show probable outcomes. They don't predict the future. But it's pretty accurate, and it seems like it's predicting the future. Interrogations, for anyone that doesn't know, that's horary astrology or prashna astrology. And it's quite fascinating because you can ask a question and literally cast a chart for the moment, and it proves the universe is an interactive consciousness with you, which is stunning. I mean, think about that. There's 8 billion people plus running around on the planet right now. It's like an ant farm, right? So, and how can one person surface up, ask an astrologer a question? I know I do it every day. And literally, I don't care what you're asking about, health, whatever. It's anything under the sun you can have. Where's my cat? Where's my keys? Is this business deal going to work? How about my relationship, right? That's a big one for everybody. And what's so fascinating about this is the planets and the eastern horizon reflect what probable outcomes are going to have. Well, that's not predicting the future, though people love that word predict. But I really think what it is it's more predicting probable outcomes based on consciousness and egoic standpoints at that point in time, if you think about that. In other words, we're all pretty damn rooted in what we believe, or we're all pretty committed to what we're doing. So the astrology is reflecting the conscious interaction that's going on. You can even see what a judge is likely to do in a court case, even if it's crazy, or good. So it's really wild. The judge is the 10th house. So I've talked about this before. Interrogation astrology is absolutely stunning. Well, why I bring that up is there's a great story. Again, I always mention the Magus of Strovolos, right? It's one of my more favorite books of many. And I love that because this, by the way, is the Magus of Strovolos. That was Daskalos. And Daskalos is a nickname that just means teacher. And what's so fascinating about the Magus of Strovolos, there's a story in there that Markides wrote. Markides was the author of that book. For anybody not familiar, that was a man who grew up in the city of Strovolos and moved to the United States. He's actually a professor of sociology, and he went back on a sabbatical. And he ran into this man known as the Magus of Strovolos, who could heal people, actually could transcend time and space, astral travel, stunning stuff. Absolutely. That's a book I would love to throw out of helicopters and have everybody read before they die. I really would, because the Magus of Strovolos is one of my favorite books to recommend because it takes us outside of the reality structures that we're in. And it really makes you look at life in a totally different way. Well, what I want to get to is there was a great story in that. My camera will come right back on. It just does that. It's a timeout camera. So what's interesting is there's a story in there where Daskalos, again, who is the Magus of Strovolos, had a premonition of some accident that was about to happen. I forget which chapter it's in, but if anybody's read that, they'll know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, you want to check it out. And he saw an accident coming at him, and he previewed it in astral travel in the so-called Akashic records. Well, then he said, well, I know this is going to happen, and I know when, and I know the setups that's going to happen. Apparently he was walking through some place, and some guy on a bicycle was going to hit him or something like that. I can't remember the story exactly. But here's what I do remember, is that he said because he knew that, he knew he couldn't stop the event, but he knew he could alter it. He could have a different outcome, probable outcome, than what was shown in the astral plane or the Akashic records. And he did that. He said, oh my God, here it came. And he made a movement. It's in the book. And he changed the outcome. This is what I find with astrology readings. When I tell people the cycles that there are, or show people, so it's so cool about readings is Zoom. I can literally, you make a movie during my readings and you're the main character. You get to watch it back. And I show people these cycles that are going on. I myself am stunned. I will, even myself, I'll catch myself in some insanity loop like we all get in, right? And I will look at my chart and go, oh my God, that's exactly what's happening. And the minute I get that, I change it. So you don't stop it. What you do is you alter the outcome by a variable. Here's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. You got two cars coming to a section point, like an intersection, right? And pretend, they're both supposed to stop at the stoplight, but, they don't. And somebody's going to come through and they're going to kaboom, crash. Now, if one of those drivers had any foreknowledge of that, or they were using their eyes and paying attention to the road like we all should be when we drive, what are you going to do? You're going to hit the brakes, you're going to veer, you're going to do something to minimize that impact as much as you can. Even when crazy stuff happens on the road, I know I live in California, I see it all the time. Crazy stuff flying off of cars. The other day I was on a motorcycle, a king-size bed was in the middle of the road. I'm like, wow, if I wasn't watching, right? I wouldn't be talking to you right now. So this is my point, is if we have foreknowledge of the energies coming at us, being in our progressions, our transits, and our doshas, we're not going to stop it. But the most powerful thing in the universe is conscious self-awareness. That is it. I really believe that. I think it is the most superior thing above astrology. And this is exactly what that diagram shows. Your upper soul roots are much more powerful than this myopic physical world. Not that the physical world isn't important. I mean, try not paying your bills, try, not steering the car, or paying attention to where you're going. You'll walk into walls, right? So we have to pay attention to this physical world, and it's very, very real. But on the other hand, our conscious awareness of things from a different viewpoint rather than the lower egoic viewpoint changes outcomes. It won't take them away, but it changes outcomes. And the yogis in India had talked a lot about that, and the Upanishads and many ancient texts, the Chaldeans did too, so the Egyptians. You can actually alter things. Your third eye chakra actually emits forces of etheric energy that we don't see with the eyes. And these have great powers. Really, really amazing stuff. So anyways, I'm going to look at some more comments here. So anyways, yeah, a lot of stuff coming in here. A lot of people are saying they don't take political sides. Yeah, there's another one here. They're talking about the acts of hatred and killing plots against Trump. They're deeming these terrorists. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy stuff. You're always going to get this. I don't care what president's in the White House. You got people that love them. You got people that hate them. And that's why they surround them with Secret Service, right? If it wasn't for that, I don't think any president would be alive too long. And anyways, this one definitely has got a few attacks against him. He's got a whole media and political propagandist talk show circuit against him. I just heard Bob Iger the other day was actually mentioning that he wanted The View to turn it down politically. I thought, wow, wow, that's not going to be easy to do. They won't have anything to talk about. But anyway, sorry I blew up. Sorry I blew up. But yeah, interesting stuff here, no doubt. And I can tell you, oh, somebody's here talking about trading. This guy's saying, as a trader, I find the Kalasarpa Yoga impacts the prices in its favor, makes it incredibly volatile. Well, he's right about that. This person just had a comment about the Kalasarpa energy right now. And that, by the way, like I said earlier, and I showed on the diagram, or on the chart, I should say, is going to continue to go on until about the 27th of July. So this is going to be a roller coaster ride. Kalasarpa yogas are always weird, man. They just, in fact, COVID happened during a Kalasarpa yoga. If you go back through history, it's amazing. We don't have time here today to do that. But if you go back through history and you look at Kalasarpa yogas when they happen, and all that means is all the planets end up in between the nodes. Now that can only happen for 2 weeks at a time because you can't stop the moon. The moon goes around the entire cycle of the zodiac every, again, 28 and a half days approximately. So you're never going to stop that. So you'll always get it broken. But the times that it's behind in the Kalasarpa yoga, which is happening right now, folks, and it's going to continue to happen on this new moon tomorrow. So it's a very, very powerful time. A lot of weird stuff can happen, but sometimes it's the divine's way of shaking things up and making change. And that would be the operative word that I would say is change. And I also find there is sometimes a bit of a demonic energy to that. So no question about that. So I just think we're in a huge time right now of change. That's exactly what the astrology says. It says right now we are in a transitional phase. It's like turning a big ship around. You crank the wheel, but do it to its length and all the complexities. It takes a long time to turn around the other way. You know, I had mentioned a while back, this is a hell of a book if anybody wants to read it. It's called The Great Taking by David Webb. And of course, his name is David Rogers Webb. And why that book, it's free, by the way. You can go to just davidwebb.com, download The Great Taking in PDF for free. And I encourage people to read that. Why? It'll scare the heck out of you. It'll scare the hell out of you, actually. And what it is it's talking about this whole situation I've been mentioning for a long time. And that was Woodrow Wilson. He signed in the Federal Reserve Act. The bankers took this place over. Of course, we've heard all the theories about the Titanic and everything. A lot of truth there. And what's interesting is in this book, David Webb was a hedge fund runner, or I should say operator. And he knew George Soros. He knew them all. It's in New York, billions of dollars. And what happened, Wall Street? And what happened is he would get in conversations with George Soros and he let the cat out of the bag. Well, he said, the guys at the top, you wouldn't believe how powerful they are. So everybody thinks it's Klaus Schwab and George Soros and BlackRock and all that State Street. Those are the you could say spokes in the wheel. The real powers are at the very top, and nobody really knows who the hell they are. Well, this is what this book talks about. You think you own the chair that you're sitting in, or the one I'm sitting in, or this shirt? You don't. The bankers literally have everything collateralized. And this is some scary, scary stuff when you think about it. Well, now let's go to where we are right now. This last election really pissed them off in no small way. Why? What you've got right now is the ship turning in a new direction. The fact that this whole Saudi Arabia thing, Qatar and Saudi Arabia, no matter whether you like Trump or hate Trump, that was pretty uncanny how he was treated, A, and B, what it represented to the petrodollar. And, everybody thinks, oh, we're all going to go broke. I think this bill, which just passed the House, is probably going to pass the Senate even more refined. That's what I get. And if that's the case, you can hate Orange Man all you want. I think it's going to have profound impacts on the future of this country. And yes, the world's changing. We're not ever going to see the days like when I was a kid, or you guys might have been kids, where there was machine shops on every corner. I mean, the world's evolved. We're going to see AI, high tech, extremely technological manufacturing techniques come in. I remember 40 years ago, I was going out with a girl whose father was the president of Snap-on Tools. And if any of you people are mechanics out there, you've heard of Snap-on Tools, best tools out there, in my opinion. Really good stuff. And this is 40 years ago. He said, Jeff, I had Thanksgiving with him. And he says, Jeff, he said, we're converting all the factories over to automation. This is 40 years ago. He said, yeah, we're going to have, instead of 380 guys, in the plant, there'll be maybe 40, maybe 50, but they'll be really skilled. And their job is just going to be to keep everything running and loading the lines and everything else. So the world's evolving. And I think all this manufacturing that's coming back here is going to come back in a totally different way, but we're really ready for it. And I think this is important too, for people to adjust their consciousness and to the world we are in. Don't let AI scare you, even though it scares me a little bit too. But I also think it's a tool. And just like the Terminator movies showed, if it stays a tool, which hopefully that Pandora's box doesn't get opened, like the Terminator movies really well said, and really serves humanity, then it's okay. I've actually had one individual tell me that AI actually said that divinity exists, that there's another power going on. And those books I pointed to before, they actually say God sends down into creation people and forces and angels that always balance creation. So total destruction doesn't happen. It's not to say destruction doesn't happen, because boy, we're certainly seeing it throughout history. Destruction always happens. It's an evolution of life. We all are born, we grow, we mature, and we die. So does everything physical in the world. But creation seems to never stop. And the upper divinity and the upper angels are outside of the time and space continuums and physical worlds that we're in. And that's, thank God, literally, is what keeps it all going. So we're just trapped down here in our emotional perception of reality. And that's a really cool thing to just kind of keep aware of, even though I can say that and go do something stupid right when I get off this podcast, like we all do, right? But we're all human. And you got to accept that you're human and you make mistakes and not beat yourself up so much. And I think young people right now really got to focus on, hey, what can I do? Because the most ubiquitous thing in the universe is the will to survive, the will to achieve, the will to accomplish something or be something. And that's the magic right there, in my opinion, of life. Is if you lose that, you're done. You're really done. Stephen Hawking's had he was a really amazing physicist and got into psychology and all that stuff. And he was the guy in the wheelchair. And Power versus Force, great book if you ever read it. And he speaks about that, the scale of consciousness. And he actually said anger is much better than depression. Why? Because anger means you're frustrated and you want change, right? And as you go up into consciousness, you start getting into happiness and expectation, and then you get into bliss and all these different levels of consciousness. So it's always important to keep the will to achieve. And even though the world's changing, I mean, it's really positive if you put these to work as tools rather than be afraid of them, right? The destructive forces is what we've been seeing for the last 10 years, the demeaning of humanness and the demeaning, elements of, being individual and, many things that have been put out there. So it's really important, I think, to keep that kind of, not that I'm here to tell anybody what to do, but I think that's my personal opinion is something extremely to keep out in front of us is the world's changed. And we now have to look at accomplishing our goals with some of the amazing tools. And when you really take technology, it's stunning, isn't it? I mean, God, we can text people in 2 seconds. I remember, God, 40, 50 years ago, I mean, you're dialing a phone, right, on a party line, or, you had a fax, or you got a letter in the mail. I mean, when you look at modern technology and, you want something, you just jump on the internet, arrives at your door the next day, whatever carrier you're bringing it in. So it's pretty wild. We definitely have a different world than what we had. And yeah, it's got its shortcomings and evil's always going to be there, but creation's stronger. And, we just got to roll with the punches and always adapt and change. And that, again, speaking of the Memorial Day, that's what they teach in the military and in police forces is adapt and change, and that's something life does really well, really, really well. And as long as we keep that going, no matter how tough life gets, because it can get tough, and sometimes you really wonder why those roadblocks get thrown at us. But again, that's what I like about readings in astrology is it really helps. Another thing I want to mention here that's pretty cool. Ella has been busy working at a really cool website, and I've been mentioning, and I want to put this on the screen. It's let me just get along here. There we go. Let me find it here. She's got it here somewhere. Yeah, this is the Astrology Today Show website, and she did an amazing job. I mean, look at all that. And she's got the graphics and everything going on. Well, one of the coolest things that I wanted to bring up in here is, I've always been a real fan of gemstones. And the reason why gemstones have a magic to them of resonance. People always say, geez, Jeff, does a gem have power? And I say, no, it does not. It resonates power. Think of a tuning fork. Think of sympathetic vibration. Well, look at the stuff she put together here. You can go on this. This is literally, the Astrology Today Show .com. And she's got a lot of great stuff. But if you go to the talismanic jewelry, we've come up with all kinds of new designs. And now today with AI, I mean, I'm literally making anything you could draw. This is just a short few examples of rings and talismans. See, and what I do is I provide untreated gemstones. You got to really watch the industry today. The jewelry industry is chock full of lab-grown gems. And I know a lot of people love them. And I can see why. They're beautiful. The problem with a lab-grown gem is it has zero power. None. If you look at it under a microscope, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And that is, they look like little Chinese soldiers marching in a row. And there's just no undulation to the crystalline natures. You look at a gem that's formed in the earth, and it's really believed that archangels are involved with this. You literally have an undulation of crystal arrangements that I don't think anyone could ever figure out. And that's why there seems to be really powerful angelic forces. Well, look at some of the stuff here we're now doing. We can do crowns for people. We can do literally headbands. Look at some of this stuff. It's really cool. We're getting back into the old ancient world. Now, the problem is if you do a crown like that with that many gems, you're probably going to need to be royalty because untreated gems are not exactly cheap. But I can tell you stuff that's simple like this. This is an amazing platinum ring that I did. It's actually like a 1930s design. I love it. And this here's another platinum ring. And I can get gemstones wholesale that are much, much cheaper and much, much higher quality. Because you buy a lot of stuff out there. It's going to be expensive when it's, going through a retail place. But you can see there's many different designs from the simple pendants, which I really like. I also do these angel pendants. You can see right here, this is the 7 inner planets of your guardian angel. And that's something that's really cool about ancient astrology that's totally different than the sun sign stuff. The exact position in the sidereal zodiac of each one of your planets actually rules an angelic force. And each of these letters is the sidereal position of the inner 7 planets. And it's very complex how it ends up. And notice, it's kind of hard to see here on the screen, but that is what they call El. That's also known in Aramaic as Aleph Lamed, which means El. If you look at the Archangel Michael, Raphael, Uriel, Gabriel. See, all these angels of God or divinity always end in El. And what's interesting is this is the summated angelic force of your birth chart. It's kind of, in effect, like a major guardian angel. And you can actually get the demonic one if you go the other way, which I've never done and really don't want to do. So don't ask me to do it. I'm not going to do it. But you can do it. And I actually have tested to see what it came out like. On myself, and I was like, whoa, this is like, you don't want to mess with that stuff. But anyhow, the coolest thing about this is it shows that you're like in a various tribe, if you will, of Israel. This is, again, in the Western, corpus of religious documents, particularly back into the Old Testament. Really interesting stuff, because you can actually see, I'll see, I give this whole sheet of correspondences in the Bible and the Psalms. That's stunning. And there's something really powerful called gematria. That's called numerology. And there's no 𝐼𝐶𝐿, and there's all these different divisions of numerology. And what it gets into is literally, you can see, like, I have one person, oh, you used to be a tailor, or you were an iron worker, or you were this or that. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty bizarre. Or you were of the king of such and such, and all this mystical, cryptic stuff that's in the ancient biblical texts. You have to unfold it through cryptic ciphers, is what they call them. They're codes. It's called ciphers. And deep stuff. The Rosicrucians were into this. The old rabbis were into this. And don't kid yourself, Rome knows about it too. It's all sitting in the bottom of the Vatican, and they ain't talking to anybody about it, I can tell you that. So this is all fascinating stuff. And I give that information with the pendants, and very powerful. And I do a lot of stuff in silver too, which saves people a lot of money now that gold is hitting $3,000 an ounce, and don't be surprised if it goes higher. So interesting stuff. By the way, I also wanted to show one book here that I was mentioning a while back. This is called the Sefer Yetzirah, which is, Sefer means book, and Yetzirah means formation or creation. And this is an interesting book. One of my favorite. There's a lot of versions of this out there, but this one was annotated and translated by a guy named Ari Kaplan, who wrote close to 80 books, and he died at the young age of, I think, like 40 years old. So fascinating book. And that's in that diagram of the four worlds of creation. The Yetziratic world is where good and evil, time and space, and dimensional places where spirit concretizes into many infinite forms of matter, which is stunning. I mean, just look at the genetics on planet Earth alone. It's enough to make your eyeballs cross. I mean, just look at the amount of animals and plants and even humans. Just look at us all. We're all different. There's not a single thing ever born the same. And that's mind-boggling to me. Look at every single human being. And that fits the astrology charts too. There's not a single chart. Forget the sun sign crap. You take the fact that our, Earth and solar system are ratcheting through, whether you're a flat earther or not, doesn't matter. It's going through this fixed star compendium or matrix, if you will. And we're believed to be at the Brahmic center around 11,500 AD. That's a long time from now. We're at 2025. But around 11,500 AD, we're going to be at what they call the Brahmic center. Now, that's the Eastern version. The Western version could be, we're going to be at the God center. That's where consciousness is literally expanded. And like the ancient biblical text said, we might live to 800, 1,000, or even longer. And this is where I really believe the spirits become under the command of humanity's consciousness. You don't even need to talk, which I'd like that because I talk too much. But anyways, my throat gets worn out. But they say we're literally telepathic. And we are at a God consciousness that's exceedingly advanced. So fun stuff. So really cool. Anyways, somebody's here coming out. Somebody says notions and potions. I don't know what that means. Jason. Oh, yeah. Yeah. He's probably talking about Jason at 𝐼𝐶𝐬𝐽. Yeah. Cool stuff. Yeah, somebody's saying they should book me on Ground Zero. Yeah, whatever. Tell them to book me. Just get a hold of us. Jeff at jeffharmon.com. But yeah, anyways, I'm just reading some of the conventions or comments here on different dimensions. People are talking about interdimensional stuff. See, it's an exciting time to be alive. I mean, you can jump on the internet and, there's a lot of opinions out there. Not that I agree with all of them, that's for sure. But at least you're exposed with a little free will to what you want to pay attention to. The consciousness is like a reality machine. It's wherever you put your focus, that's, becomes your belief systems. So interesting stuff. So anyways, let me just go on and read a few more here. Some people talk about a 6,000 year cycle. Yeah, somebody's talking again about the 𝐼𝐸 model. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff here, going on that people are talking about, the cusp of the nexus, all this. Yeah, we're definitely in a ascending consciousness. There's no question. There's an old saying, consciousness raises funeral by funeral. And, again, certain religions have been very dogmatic about reincarnation. You're all sinners and you're all going to hell, right? The evidence strongly refutes that stuff. Another book I mention a lot, and this was a really cool book. This is the Keys of Enoch, or the Book of Enoch. And this is some deep, deep stuff where it talks about there's parallel dimensions and these various different classes of angels, and angels that intermix with the human race, and also Nephilim, and there's all kinds of stuff. This gets into maybe what's going on in a good sense, with not all of it, but part of it, the ufology world, or the UAP world. You look at what's going on in some of the scientific studies with Skinwalker Ranch and many, many other places. There's a lot of paranormal phenomena going on. I know I've experienced it myself here many, many times. I've had motorcycles shut down. I've had missing time. A friend of mine and I were driving a long time ago, and I said, how did we get on this side of the freeway? And he looks at me and goes, I don't know. And I look at the watch that I had on, and I said, it's almost like 30 or 40 minutes later. And we know because we were going someplace and we ended up late. So it was really wild. And this kind of stuff is reported by people all the time. And I actually did studies in this, in remote viewing and in various different, psychic phenomena. Does astrology play into this? And the answer is yes, it really does. So really wild stuff. So I got to get running here, folks. But thanks so much for all your comments. A lot of great books here people are commenting on, and various different things. Someone's mentioning, does the trillions of gallons of water from our oceans, you think it can stay contained without flooding our lands on a round Earth? Flat Earth is possible. Think about it. Yeah, I agree. I'm not down one way or another. I've seen so much stuff on the flat Earth, and a lot of the points I agree with. I really do. I have to say, wow, there's some truth to that. And I've talked to a lot of airline pilots, and even these guys who are flying around, a lot of them aren't sure, and they are actually open to it. I'll never forget here, I think it was about a year or two ago, it was either SpaceX or somebody had shot a rocket off, and I was on my motorcycle, and I saw this thing go up in the sky, and it hit something like a dome. And then it went sideways, and it almost looked like a boat in water. You could just see this white kind of light being illuminated by the rocket, fuel, the force of the rocket going. And I was like, wow, this is weird. It's like it hit something and it went sideways, and then it went out and up. And I thought, okay, so there's definitely a lot of stuff that they're telling us that's not true. And a lot of folks are saying, oh, NASA is floating everything with helium. I don't buy that one. And again, I don't want to sit here with my opinions, but there's definitely a lot of evidence that people have been putting out there about all kinds of things, of the moon landings that are very questionable. There's no question. And I agree with it. The only thing I can say about astrology, because this is such a huge topic, is no matter what it is, whether it's flat or round or whatever, it acts like a cyclic model. And, I take, apps like Skyview. If anybody's ever heard of Skyview, it's a really cool app. You can download it on your iPhone or your Droid, and it'll literally allow you to see where the planets are ascending and descending, when they're above you, below you, all that stuff. It's a real enigma what's happening here with evidence that's being presented on both sides. And, I really don't want to get into the debate of whether it's flat or round. The only thing I can tell you is I'm more concerned about us. What's happening to us in consciousness and the cycles we all go through. Because whenever I see people have certain astrological conditions, some are once in a lifetime, and a lot of them are. When you look at primary directions, which is a fancy word for when we're all born the Earth is literally a time machine. And that's the main thing. Whether it's flat or round, doesn't matter. It is a time machine. And there's something called secondary progressions that are so accurate, they're creepy. Literally, if you're a certain age, let's say, somebody's 40 years old or 80 years old or 60 years old or what have you. It's stunning stuff. That camera will come right back. And what it shows here is that literally, like, here's a good example. Like, say someone's 40 years old. Let's just pick an age like that. Literally, if you cast a chart when you're 40 years old using secondary progressions, it shows where every single planet moved to 40 days after you were born, meaning a day equals a year. Those are called secondary progressions, and they're huge cycles. I use them in every reading, do it every day, and I'm stunned at how accurate it is. It's stunning. The secondary progressed moon will go around your birth chart every 28 and a half approximate years. Not exact, but close. Here's the point. You can only live to have maybe 3 of those functionally, you see, and it's going to be different for everybody, the cycles that they hit, because it depends on where the moon is in your birth chart. What house is it in? Where's it at to your ascendant and your descendant? Furthermore, the juxtaposition of where Saturn, the planet of karma, right? And karma can be good too, by the way. It doesn't have to be bad. And the moon is going to set up when you're going to have Saturn's 7.5-year transit of the moon, also known as 𝐼𝐶𝐵. And one shoe does not fit all. I've seen people rise to great heights during 𝐼𝐶𝐵. I've seen them crash and burn and have hell going on in their lives. It all depends on the transits, progressions, and the yogas in your birth chart. Yogas are the imprint at when you drew first breath. And that's why the Earth is a time machine. And it's a really unique one, exceedingly complex, beyond what any astrologer, myself included, or psychic is ever going to unravel. The little bit we do know is profound, and these cycles work. So it doesn't matter if the world's flat or round, right? Does it? What I'm more concerned about is my life, your life, and anyone else's life I'm doing a reading for, to be accurate and aid them to understanding when's the crap storms coming, when's it going to be blue sky, when's a life peak coming. See, that's the coolest thing. Like, I just had an individual, really sweet guy, musician, right? And he's been through a really rough time. And I was so encouraged, and I do this all the time, to show him, hey, man, you got a life peak coming. Things are going to really pick up right here. And, people always get a little skeptical. I know I did too. But when you tell them, oh, you just had this, and this happen, and he's like, wow, how did you know? Well, because the chart shows it. And then you got this coming. It's amazing. You see, so you can see whether it's fair weather, cloudy weather, sunshine, or horrible storms. And what does all that do? It's not predicting the future. It's giving you awareness. It's predicting energies. That it does 100%. But how you react to them is everything. The human conscious mind is the most senior thing, and that's a divine, God-given consciousness we all have. It's our reaction. And it's easy to say, but once you look at it from that standpoint, it really gives you the edge. And that's the key. With that, I got to get rolling. Thanks for everybody for joining me, and have a great Memorial Day. Be safe, be well. And next week, I'm going to try and do a live in the middle of the week. Secondly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be a contact in the desert. So I'm going to be around some really cool people, very well-known people. And I'll be doing it from my iPhone. So if the audio works, it works. So, but anyways, thank you so much for joining me. A lot of great comments here. And I really appreciate you all taking your Sunday to join me. Thanks so much.